Imagine walking through the heart of a Nazi intelligence compound, wearing their uniform, carrying their rank, and knowing that one wrong glance could expose everything. He moves with steady precision, each step measured. Salutes snap toward him from soldiers who never question his presence. They see what the uniform tells them to see. They never consider the possibility of anything else. That blindness is his only shield. He stops at a steel door stamped with two words, Geheime Unterlagen, top secret. Behind it lies a folder thick enough to shift the direction of a war, troop movements, coded orders, the kind of information generals lose sleep over. He reaches for the handle. Then, a voice. A guard steps into view, boots scraping against concrete. The guard shouldn't be here. The officer he's impersonating rarely comes to this wing. For a split second, the air tightens. The man turns slowly, every muscle under control, every detail of his forged identity ready to be deployed. His face stays calm, his eyes calculate distances, exits, timing. He rehearsed this 1,000 times, but rehearsals never included a guard this close. The guard studies him. A beat, another. A smart line. In a regime built on rigid racial hierarchy, the greatest flaw wasn't brutality, it was certainty. Certainty about who could be loyal, who could be intelligent, who could even stand in this uniform at all. The guard finally nods and steps aside. The man walks on, deeper into the compound, deeper into a mission that should be impossible. He's not just infiltrating an enemy force, he's exploiting the one prejudice the Nazis never even thought to question. He was the spy they never suspected, the narrator says quietly, because they didn't believe he could exist. But the real question hangs in the air, sharper than the tension in that hallway. How did he get here in the first place? And how much longer can he survive inside Hitler's war machine? Picture Europe in the final years before the world tears itself apart. Borders tightening, governments falling. And in the center of it all, a regime rising with an ideology built on rigid racial fantasies. Beliefs so absolute they reshaped how its followers saw every inch of the world around them. As the Nazis expand their reach, one flaw becomes obvious to anyone studying them closely. Their certainty. Certainty about who matters. Certainty about who belongs. Certainty about who could ever threaten them from within. That certainty becomes a strategic opening, but only if someone is willing to step straight into the lion's mouth. Allied intelligence knows they're fighting blind. They're guessing at troop movements, scrambling to decode intercepted messages, and racing against a war machine that grows more confident by the day. They need someone who can slip past the Reich's psychological armor, someone who can move through Europe without triggering the Nazi instinct to scrutinize. That person is him. An African-born, multilingual operative with the rare ability to disappear, not by hiding, but by exploiting the very prejudices meant to erase him. He speaks languages the Reich barely expects foreigners to know. He understands cultural nuances they assume he won't. And in his silence, he sees everything they miss. He's stilled, precise, and deeply aware of the danger. Not just the usual risk of espionage, but the daily humiliation of operating inside a system that marks him as inferior, even as he infiltrates its highest intelligence corridors. A smart line. The Nazis' greatest vulnerability wasn't a broken code or a missing document. It was their inability to imagine a threat that didn't fit their worldview. To survive, he must turn that arrogance into cover. He must weaponize the blind spots created by Nazi ideology, even as he walks through a world engineered to crush people like him. Then comes the assignment that changes everything. He's ordered to assume a German military identity. Not a disguise for a night, not a forged pass for one checkpoint, but a full immersion into Hitler's intelligence network itself. One mistake wouldn't just cost him his life. It would collapse the entire undercover chain behind him. So the question lingers, heavy and unresolved. How do you prepare for a mission where every salute, every greeting,
Every passing glance is a test you can never afford to fail. Imagine being ordered to prove your loyalty to a regime that would kill you on sight if it knew who you really were. His first assignment is deceptively simple. Pose as a foreign volunteer eager to serve the Reich. The uniform is coarse, the barracks smell of cold metal and cigarette smoke, but the real tension comes from the eyes scanning him, measuring him, dismissing him. In their minds, a man of African descent can fetch supplies, deliver messages, take orders. Strategic thinking? Impossible. And that belief becomes his opening. Days later, the twist hits faster than he expected. A mid-level intelligence officer requests him personally, not as a courier, but as an assistant, someone allowed into planning rooms, briefing halls, and restricted corridors, a role far riskier than anything he trained for, and far more valuable. During one evening briefing, he spots it on the wall, a map marked with arrows and dates, an upcoming offensive still unknown to Allied command. The kind of detail that could shift an entire front line. He memorizes it in seconds. He needs to get that information out tonight.
But a siren blares across the compound. A sudden curfew, barracks sealed, guards doubling their rounds. He stands frozen, weighing the map in his mind, knowing the window is closing. How do you smuggle intelligence out of a lockdown Nazi base without letting anyone see you think? His access expands, but so does the danger. A rival officer begins watching him too closely. Small questions at first, where he learned German, what region he claims to be from. Questions with answers he's rehearsed, but spoken under a tension that grows by the day. Then a discovery, a new encrypted communications protocol under development. If deployed, it could blind Allied intelligence overnight. To gather details, he has to embed himself deeper into a unit infamous for harsh loyalty tests. No second chances, no weak performances. During a surprise interrogation drill, the rival officer steps forward, eyes sharp. He asks a cultural detail only a native German would know, something the spy studied endlessly but never thought he'd be quizzed on in front of a full unit. He answers immediately, calm, precise. But as the officer's expression stays unreadable, one question tightens in his chest. Did he choose the right version of the truth? His intelligence reaches Allied hands, and the result is bigger than he ever planned. A full operation is launched based on his reports. A victory with a cost. The Nazis panic. They start hunting for a leak. Commanders whisper, files are pulled, interrogations begin behind closed doors. And suddenly, all evidence points not to him, but to his unsuspecting superior officer. If he says nothing, an innocent man will be executed. If he steps in, he risks exposing the very existence of his undercover network. He chooses the only path available, forging new documents to shift suspicion elsewhere. Quiet, fast, flawless work. But before dawn, the Gestapo arrives. A full compound sweep, every room, every locker, every scrap of paper. He looks around his quarters, false IDs, coded notes, scraps of intelligence, and feels time compress around him. Can he erase every trace of who he really is before the boots reach his door? Imagine standing in the center of a compound that's turning itself inside out to find you. The sweep begins before sunrise. Boots slam against concrete, doors ripped open, files stripped from cabinets. Officers lined against walls, forced to account for every movement they've made in the last week. Dogs weave through corridors, noses low, trained to track anyone who's been where they shouldn't. He walks among them, the perfect image of a loyal assistant, even as the net tightens around his feet. This is the moment he activates the escape plan he's rehearsed in silence for months. A timed exit, a stolen pass, a gap in the patrol schedule only he has noticed. He moves toward the outer perimeter, calm on the surface, calculating beneath it. Then he sees it, a new folder on a desk abandoned during the chaos. Inside is the final piece, the exact date and direction of the upcoming German offensive. A detail the Allies need now, not hours from now.
The information burns in his mind, and with it comes a brutal truth. He has to go back. Not away from danger, but straight into the archives the Gestapo is currently tearing apart. He slips down a side corridor, avoiding patrols by inches. The deeper he moves, the more the compound hums with fear and suspicion. Every alarm that echoes through the halls feels aimed directly at his back. He walks among them, the perfect image of a loyal assistant, even as the net tightens around his feet. This is the moment he activates the escape plan he's rehearsed in silence for months. A timed exit, a stolen pass, a gap in the patrol schedule only he has noticed. He moves toward the outer perimeter, calm on the surface, calculating beneath it. Then he sees it. A new folder on a desk abandoned during the chaos. Inside is the final piece, the exact date and direction of the upcoming German offensive. A detail the Allies need now, not hours from now. The information burns in his mind, and with it comes a brutal truth. He has to go back, not away from danger, but straight into the archives the Gestapo is currently tearing apart. He slips down a side corridor, avoiding patrols by inches. The deeper he moves, the more the compound hums with fear and suspicion. Every alarm that echoes through the halls feels aimed directly at his back. He reaches the restricted archive room. The door is ajar. He steps inside, then freezes. The rival officer stands there, the one who's been questioning him for days, the one who came closest to seeing through his disguise. Their eyes lock. No lies left to hide behind. No escape route that doesn't run through this man. A long, razor-thin beat. Then, the rival officer lowers his voice and says something he never expected. He doesn't believe the Reich can win. He's seen enough corruption, enough chaos, enough leaders denying reality. And he knows someone inside has been feeding information out. He should arrest him. He doesn't. Instead, he steps aside and lets the spy pass. No words of allegiance, no promises, just a quiet acknowledgement between two men caught in a collapsing empire. The spy slips back toward the perimeter as alarm spikes across the compound. A siren wails, officers shout, searchlights swing. His fabricated identity, months of careful construction, begins to feel like it's dissolving around him. The closer he gets to the gate, the more it feels like shedding a burning skin. But he gets out, into the night, into the snow, into the thin margin of freedom that still stands between life and exposure. Now everything depends on one final step, transmitting the date of the offensive before it's too late. The question hangs sharp in the cold air. Will the Allies receive his last message in time to stop what's coming? Imagine a message racing across enemy lines, carried through static, code, and the thin margins of luck. His final transmission reaches Allied command just hours before the German offensive is set to begin. Commanders adjust their positions, troops brace, and when the attack comes, it hits a wall instead of an open flank.
The momentum of the war shifts, not with a grand speech or a cinematic battle, but with a few lines of stolen intelligence gathered by a man the Nazis never believed to be a threat. But there's no victory parade waiting for him. His handlers move him from one shadow assignment to another. Friends disappear. Some die. Some never knew who he truly was. His identity fractures under layer after layer of secrecy until even his allies debate the details of his missions. A smart line. In wartime intelligence, the most effective agents often leave the least evidence that they ever existed. After the war, his reports are sealed. Files stamped classified drown out his name. When medals are handed out, when stories are told, he isn't in the room. He returns to civilian life quieter, older, carrying the weight of operations that history won't recognize for decades. And when historians eventually dig up fragments of his work, they're stunned by the pattern. He succeeded because he leaned into the very thing the Nazis believed made him invisible. Their ideology told them he couldn't strategize, couldn't deceive, couldn't infiltrate. That blindness became his camouflage. And through that blindness, he dismantled pieces of the Reich from within. History forgot his face.
but it couldn't erase the consequences of his courage. Imagine looking at today's intelligence world. Global networks, multicultural teams, analysts trained to think beyond borders, and realizing one man lived that future long before it had a name. His missions proved that the strongest advantage isn't technology or firepower, but perspective, the kind authoritarian regimes consistently underestimate. His life showed something modern agencies now treat as doctrine. Diversity isn't symbolic, it's strategic. Threats are unpredictable because people are unpredictable. And the viewpoints dismissed by rigid systems often become the very tools that break them. He operated in an era built on exclusion, yet turned that exclusion into access. In a war defined by ideology, he used ideology itself as a weapon, quietly, precisely, relentlessly. He never stood on a battlefield, he never commanded troops, but he altered the shape of the war all the same. He won the war from the shadows, not by being unseen, but by being unseen by the people who refused to see him.